Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Edan of LightCycleAstrology.com. Hope you're doing well out there. Today we are doing Mantic Monday episode number 10, taking a look at the astrology coming through for the second week of October. And this is the week that everybody has been really keeping an eye on for the month, because all of the most intense or hard-hitting aspects are forming in the sky during this part of the month. And really in the course of the whole year of 2023, this is really one of the biggest weeks. So most astrologers have been saying stuff like, if we can get through the second week of October, then things begin to mellow out. So we'll get into why that is here in a moment. Before we do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. Leave some comments in the comment section, and you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com if you would like to get a consultation from me. That is where I offer my readings for a very affordable price, and we've been having a lot of really great feedback from clients over there. So if there's anything that you would like to investigate or gain insight in with transits coming up, or zodiacal releasing periods, or anything related to a particular topic or area of life, that is something you can do, is find out about that and get some more personalized astrological guidance from me personally over there. Okay, well, thanks for letting me plug that. Now, let's get into the astrology for the second week of October and pull up the real-time clock, and we'll take a look now. I actually want to start with Saturday, and that's because, unfortunately, as most people are aware by now, there were attacks on Israel by Hamas, and I think that this is an interesting demonstration of how planets can begin to form aspects in the sky. And even before they perfect, there's kind of this range of engagement where they will aptly mirror the archetypal themes or tensions that we are experiencing down here on the planet. So you'll notice, for instance, that on Saturday, now let me go ahead and throw up my title here. Hamas attack was at 6:35 a.m. Israeli time, and I don't have the real-time clock set to Israeli time right now, but earlier when I checked it out, the exact moment of the attack, the Mars square Pluto aspect, that is what we're looking at. This perfects today on Monday, but going back to this on Saturday when the attack first happened, Mars was 1 degree and 15 minutes applying, or to go before the exact angle was perfected. So we always talk about a 3-degree range of engagement between aspects. So I wanted to start out by, getting into this very potent and powerful Mars square Pluto aspect. Now, this aspect is perfecting today on Monday, but it's going to be hanging around over the next couple of days as it separates out. And no doubt you have already been feeling the tension of this very strong and powerful aspect. I first noticed it myself yesterday on Saturday when I was working, and it was a day. It was a really frustrating, a really challenging. Even I sustained some injury getting my work done. I got this scrape on my hand. I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but this energy is really erratic and volatile, this Mars square Pluto. But of course, when you have 1 degree and 15 minutes applying, we'll get into one of the reasons why this may be reflective of a new war starting in the Middle East in a second here, because there are other aspects at play here. But essentially, you have some of the archetypal themes to watch for Mars square Pluto, of course, is the god of war Mars, making a very, very difficult aspect to the god of the underworld. So it's almost as if there is this very volatile eruption, and oftentimes these seemed like everything is going along fine, and all of a sudden, just like how we notice in nature, where all of a sudden a volcano just erupts out of nowhere and causes a great disaster, that can really aptly characterize a Mars square Pluto aspect, where it's seemingly like there are forces, really deep natural forces that are just erupting within us or erupting around us in the environment by other people or what have you. And it's almost like, well, why do we go along, fine, and then all of a sudden come into this kind of turmoil? That's one of the things. It's almost like, while just because Mars squares Pluto now, we have to have this big intense thing come through and be grabbed by the planets at play. So it's curious, but I guess the answer to that is something along the lines of, and not that I know, but it could be that, just in the same way that we notice nature having a fair amount of volatility to it, where there's that really powerful, deep-seated or, deep, powerful volcanic kind of explosive energy that just needs to be released, right? And that is one of the key words that has long been associated with Pluto, is that there's some kind of energy that is almost trapped and needs to be released. Remember that when Pluto was discovered in the 1930s, they were working out how to develop the nuclear technology, right, where they're splitting the atom, and that incredible innate power that is stored up or frozen in atoms. If they split that, then it's released, and they came up with the first atomic bombs right when Pluto was being discovered. And of course, we have plutonium and things like that. But so the god of war meeting that is, that is a very volatile kind of aspect that reflects a kind of tension hanging around that is really deep-seated. And when you have Mars in the sign of Libra, in a sign that Mars doesn't like to be in, because he's basically like a war general sitting around a table of diplomats, and there's like an issue that has to be worked out, but it's like everybody's just talking about peace, right? In Libra, right? It's like the cabinet only wants to put diplomatic solutions on the table, and here's the war general, and he's like, that's not what I do. What I do is make war. So you really get that there is kind of an angst or a tension ready to go here, with Mars already being frustrated in this sign of Libra. So when you have a frustrated, worn out and tired Mars now at the end of this sign, just aching to get back into Scorpio, he's tired, he's worn out, he's traveled through the entire sign, and his frustration has built along the way, being in this very antithetical Venusian place or environment that he doesn't like to express himself through. It's difficult. He has a challenging time figuring out how not to react in ways that are unpeaceful. And, Mars can even question, it's like, well, why do I even have to be peaceful? But there's, he's operating in Venus's territory. So of course he has to try to figure out how to be peaceful, but that's not what he does. So it's really antithetical to his nature. And that is where the frustration comes. Now, being that this is also the sign associated with the scales of justice, this I think is where the volatility can really be archetypally noticed. If there is some kind of injustice that is perpetrated by a Machiavellian or all-powerful institution, we're talking about we're talking about Pluto in Capricorn sign, where it seems like there's injustice, especially at a pervasive or all-consuming kind of edifice, like a societal level of like government or monolithic power, that is very easily where Mars could rail against and fight for a cause of fairness or justice and say, no, this will not stand. So you really get fights coming out over the appearance of things that are not just, not fair, maybe not even peaceful or something like that. But they're railing against Pluto, and Pluto represents that very pervasive institutional level power. So one way that this could manifest is if you have any, if you are managing over people, or if you are a boss or something like that, or even within the family structure, if you have children and you're sort of like the CEO of the family, this is where, if you hold any power, it's likely that if you're not really careful with how you use that power, that if somebody views that as like an overstep of power, that is definitely where you could receive, some revolution from, or some argument or fighting over, or some conflict comes about because of some perceived abuse of power. Or it's likely that if we are in a situation that feels like we are facing some kind of unjust power, or somebody that is being manipulative or doesn't have our best interest at heart and is really only just kind of stepping on us, that's where we could sort of rail against that as well. So those are some of the tensions that you could be describing this particular energy that's hanging in the air over the next couple of days. And of course, again, we had the attacks by Hamas on Israel as this energy was building. Now, one thing that's really, really interesting is that also what has been culminating in the air is perfecting or happening also on the same day, on Monday, is Venus's entrance into the sign of Virgo, where she in ancient astrology was said to be depressed or fallen. One very interesting keyword that, or phrase of language that ancient astrologers would have looked at is, Venus tends to represent peace. It's one of her significations. So when peace moves into a sign where she is fallen, you could read this as peace has fallen, and Mars makes war against the underworld, or Mars brings out the volatility of war. So, and that's exactly, unfortunately, what we saw in the new conflict over the weekend. So, not a great, these are not happy. We're not talking about Venus trine Jupiter aspects. Now we will later in the month, but right now, we have to get to that. Right now, it's definitely more difficult or challenging. One final story I'll tell you about that I noticed on Friday. I have a friend who works for a farming co-op, and very interesting because, again, Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, a Saturn-ruled sign, and Saturn was traditionally associated with sort of being the land manager or the tax man or the farm boss or something like that, especially over specifically farmers. Or Saturn would be considered like the slave master of actual slaves working the land. And we have Capricorn in Earth sign. So, this really interesting example of this Mars square Pluto is my friend working in this farming co-op. Now he's on the end where he's processing the fruit. But anyway, on Friday, a farmer came and was irate, and my friend says that every time this person comes, he's sort of always like this, but he only has to deal with him a couple times a year. But he's coming, he's throwing the breadfruit angrily into the bins, and my friend says, "Hey, please don't throw the fruit. Like, it bruises it, it causes it to spoil." And the farmer just loses it on him, goes ballistic, begins to threaten him, the other coworkers. Begins to threaten not only physical violence, or makes insinuendos that there's going to be some physical confrontation, and is very aggressive. A lot of conflict, and then even comes back and retorts with a threat of legal action. So there you have Mars in the sign of Libra, right? A place where we get the association with courts and justice and the scales of justice and things like that. So very interesting example, I think, of some of this energy building. And that was on Friday. So this is just as the aspect is building. But again, let's also bring in here now Venus's entrance into the sign of Virgo. So we roll the real-time clock forward to Monday. Here is Mars perfecting that square back to Pluto and Venus's entrance into Virgo. So for me, when you talk about planets that move into signs where they were said to be depressed or fallen, that language is something you have to be careful of, because if you have, like, for instance, Venus in the sign of Virgo in your birth chart, it doesn't mean that Venus in Virgo is only going to be bad. It's only going to make bad things happen. That isn't really the case. What it is more is that the language is meant to help you describe something that is difficult. Because we are all familiar with things that we are good at or that come easy or naturally to us. Some people are really good at just being very social, and that's sort of an effortless, quality that they don't really have to try at. Or some people are really intellectual and can speak really well, and that's something that just sort of comes easy to them, whereas other people have to work on that. Venus in the sign of Virgo is basically describing how Venus is in a place where archetypally Venusian things do not go on easy. So everything within the archetypal realm of Venus is brought down low, and it takes a lot of work to raise it up. And so you have to work at it. It's something that requires work to sort of lift it back up. So peace has fallen. It's going to take a lot of work to restore peace, right? But if you consider that Venus is also connected with creative endeavors, this could be a time where, if you're an artist, that the muse simply stops talking and it's a lot of work, or that there are other things that for some reason keep you from doing your art, like responsibilities or family or something along those lines. If you are in a relationship, it could be that one thing that is difficult for Venus in Virgo, I think, is often feeling self-value. Like maybe you have to work to feel good about yourself, or feel like you're valuable, or feel like you're beautiful or attractive or something like that. So this might be a time where Venus in Virgo, it's more difficult to sort of just effortlessly feel like you're great and wonderful and attractive, and people like you and all that kind of stuff. The social things could be a dimension that is, just broadly speaking, with Venus in Virgo, more difficult now, right? Social things, parties, relationships, all of those Venusian types of things are going to require a lot more work. Now, one thing that I was thinking about all week long was this very interesting transition of Venus out of Leo into Virgo, because you have Venus for a long time over the summer was in the sign of Leo, and this is her going through the temple of the sun, or the sign that the sun is the host lord of. So Venus in the spotlight, and very interesting, what we call Hollywood famous people is stars. I don't know if we used to call people stars that were famous before Hollywood, but I know for sure Hollywood people have been known for decades and decades now as stars or starlets. Venus is the brightest star in the sky, so you get that sense that with Venus in the sign of Leo, she's like a star, right? She's almost famous. She's almost central in the society, like all can see her. But one motif that I think is really, really fitting for Venus's transition out of this very solar place into Mercury's temple of Virgo is the Cinderella motif or story. Now, in the story, of course, everybody's familiar, but Cinderella starts out on her hands and knees being abused or mistreated by her stepsisters and her stepmother. Her father has died, and she's essentially kind of like a house slave or a house servant with no prospects for a future. And then through magical, fortune, she's given an opportunity to be, completely remade in this beautiful magical gown with shoes, and it's like a a cosmic fairy godmother makeover. And then she's sent to the palace, and she ends up meeting the prince and dancing with the prince and becoming like the talk of the whole kingdom because she's so radiant. So Venus in Leo is kind of like that Cinderella at the palace, being visible for everybody to see and radiant and beautiful, dancing with the prince and really lavishing in the pleasure of those solar kinds of motifs, right? But this would be like the story in reverse. This would be like if Venus started out at the ball dancing with the prince, lavishing up all of the pleasure of, royal court life or whatever for an evening. And then the come down, right? You have to go back to the cottage and get back on your hands and knees, take off the beautiful gown, and be mistreated by your stepfamily, and you're left to toil cleaning ashes or cinders out of the fireplace in the kitchen with ash all over you or cinder all over you, which is why, of course, she was called Cinderella, because she was dirty from all that toil and work. So that's sort of the motif, but in reverse, right? So when they say that Venus is depressed in Virgo, you can sort of, I think you really get the essence of how that would be depressing, right? Moving out of Leo into Virgo for Venus. But again, Venus isn't all bad in the sign of Virgo. There are some positives to Venus in Virgo, and one of them is that Venus in Virgo can be a lot less prideful or arrogant or vain or greedy. Venus in Virgo can be incredibly graceful and forgiving, and be friendly in a way that is very helpful, obviously. So one way that we see a motif for Venus in Virgo, or a theme for Venus in Virgo, archetypally speaking, is that she's less haughty, and she is very humble, but like in a real pure, innocent, humble, good-hearted nature. So it's actually quite a beautiful place for Venus, I would think. But I think that the danger of Venus in Virgo is essentially to remember that you're beautiful and attractive, and that you, even though you might have to work harder at remembering that, or work harder at social situations, you basically don't want to get sucked into feeling like you don't have value, or you're not attractive, or like everything is kind of negative on the front of pleasure or creativity or attractiveness. That is sort of the work that has to be done to sort of raise Venus back up. Now, of course, after she travels through Virgo, she's going to enter her own temple of Libra, which is, of course, when she makes a pretty good recovery for that. But this is a time where she requires a lot more work. So that is also coming through, and really shifting the energy that we've been having for, all summer long with Venus in Leo, is really shifting now in the second week of October. And one thing that happens the very next day, on Tuesday, if we go forward, is that Venus also begins to make an opposition to Saturn, which is kind of more of the same, but it's now we're bringing in the testimony of Saturn that there may be something rejected. There may be something that feels like it's apart or other or isolated or canceled or restricted or limited. So again, if you're like, for instance, an artist, this could be a time where the muse stops and there's a red light that says, nope, it's not time to do art right now. Maybe there's responsibilities or duties that you have to attend to over the creative projects that you would like to do. Or maybe it's somebody that you've been interested in romantically, and you ask them out, you finally get the courage to ask them out on a date, and they reject you and they say no. Or maybe even they don't reject you, but circumstances don't allow for the two of you to get together. Right. So that's a pretty tough place for Venus, where she can feel isolated, depressed, lonely, unattractive, rejected. So that's hard. And that's not a transit that lasts for a long time. So But it is something to kind of just remember that, if there's a feeling of like being unloved and alone, it'll pass. It'll take a couple of days, but that is kind of the energy that is also coming through the beginning of the week. Now, there is also on the 10th a very, very interesting aspect. As soon as Venus moves into Virgo, you'll notice that we talked about contra antitias for the October monthly overview in the last video that we did, but so I won't go into the whole contra antitia thing and what that is, because I just want to keep going with the actual deep dive into this particular contra antitia aspect. But you'll notice that here is Venus at the very beginning degrees of the sign of Virgo, and Mars almost at the, almost back into Scorpio at the very last degrees of Libra. So they are sharing a equal but opposite amount of light and darkness. So contra antitias, the way that you read those aspects is that they're like an opposition between the two planets. So you could look at this and basically read it like Venus is making a secretive opposition to Mars. So not only is Venus making an opposition to Saturn, the greater malefic, as it was called in the ancient world, but we also have Venus simultaneously making a secret opposition to Mars, the lesser malefic, as he was called in the ancient world. So Venus is really getting beat up at the beginning of the week here for a few days for sure. A secret opposition to Mars, to me, sounds like secretive kinds of conflicts or aggression that is made in relationships, or like going back to the Hamas attack on Israel, like kind of like a secret attack, right? You don't see it coming. So one thing to definitely watch out for is secretive kinds of attacks or secretive kinds of aggression. Especially with Mars still, separating out from that square to Pluto, a god of the underworld, a god of the invisible or the unseen. There is a lot of symbolism here with the darkness and secretive kinds of things. And I think it's easy to get paranoid with this kind of stuff. So it's not that there 100% is things happening behind your back and you're unaware of it, but definitely it's good to be as aware as you can that you just have to be really careful with people in relationships right now. It's not a time to just put things on the back burner and just sort of cruise. It's like more of a time where you would want to just, every step that you make, you'd want to just be very, very careful and very, very prudent and really respectful, and all of those kinds of things can help mitigate that propensity for the secretness that's hanging in the air, where people might be aggressive, or we might suddenly feel like starting a conflict, or we're harboring kind of resentments, but we don't talk about it, or something along those lines, right? Which probably won't stay hidden because of the Mars square Pluto aspect. So that's another really, really fascinating aspect that is coming through. Now, we don't get a lot of contra antitia aspects even in a whole year. So these are real rare aspects that we are getting this month in October. Now, one final thing that is happening on Tuesday is Mercury gains enough closeness to the sun where he moves into combustion, or enters that between 8 or 7 degrees proximity to the sun, where not only is he invisible, but he is really being burnt up in the sky by the heat of the sun. So Mercury under combustion is like really just feeling hot. So things like headaches, things like difficult communications, almost like a Mercury retrograde, where you know, cars breaking down, computers breaking down, just having a really hard time making communication come out in a way that isn't frazzled or feeling fried or is really tense, or, you know, has just kind of a difficultness to it. And it might be that there are, of course, troubles or issues with money. It's like like the money's burning a hole in your pocket or something like that, and it's like you're required to have to spend it on something. Like definitely one delineation that you could see with Mercury under combustion in Libra is something like, needing to dole out some money for, a court case or a lawyer or something like that. So Mercury also going through kind of a hard time as well here. Now, if we go to Thursday, we get something that I'm personally looking forward to. We get to Mars finally moving into Scorpio, which is one of the biggest things of the month improvement-wise for any planet. So this is where things begin to improve a little bit, but there's a couple of ways to read Mars entering his temple of Scorpio. One, he's feeling a lot better. He's out of Libra, where he has a difficult time expressing his natural tendencies. But is that really good? Mars in Scorpio is very sustaining. If there is a war that is ongoing, this is a sign that the war will be sustained. Mars is very capable of sustaining whatever action he wants to sustain at this time, because Scorpio is a solid or fixed sign, right? It's the sign that is right in the middle of the season. So it takes the light of change into the dark half of the year and stabilizes that increase of darkness. Mars is very capable. I'm sure many people have heard before that, like, Scorpios, people who have Scorpio placements are really good at holding a grudge, right? They don't forget. And that's because, again, you get that sustained quality. One difference that you see between Aries and Scorpio, both Mars-ruled places, is that Aries tends to be a place that is cardinal and changes things really quickly. There's like a burst of action or energy that comes through, but it dies out rather quickly. Whereas, again, Mars in Scorpio, this is a sustained, solid or fixed sign where it tends to be a lot more lasting. So one read on this is that Mars is finally independent of Venusian things. He finally can get out of Venus's temple and say, I'm strong, I'm on my own, I don't need that anymore, I'm independent, I'm capable, I can take action. But it might also be that if there were conflicts happening earlier with all of the tense aspects, that you find yourself alone and you need to sustain that independence, and you need to take action to put things in place because things have, kind of changed or whatever. But if not, it's likely that whatever kinds of actions we've been engaged in, that we hit like a stride of being able to maintain that and keep going with that. So that's the positive side of this. Now, the next day, we have a Friday the 13th this month. How crazy is that, with the spooky time of the year where we're heading towards Halloween in the month of October? And we get this Mars beginning to apply to trine Saturn on Friday, October the 13th. One day I'll have to tell you guys about the Friday the 13th story, where that became kind of like a legend of scary or misfortune that comes through on that day, but not right now because I don't want to get off the topic here. But Mars making a trine to Saturn. So again, this is really helping to sustain the action. This is a time where whatever actions that we're engaged in, whatever ways in which we need to maintain an individuality or a defensive watchfulness of circumstances, or a war, if we're engaged in some kind of fight or conflict or war, these things become very much sustained. But Mars making that trine to Saturn is really helping out and saying, I'm going to give you the fortuitousness to come through and make this last. I'm going to slow things down a little bit in a beneficial way that you can really meticulously keep an eye on things and watch out and be defensive if you have to. Now, Saturn in the sign of Pisces retrograde, This is a Saturn that can be quite emotional. This is a Saturn that is prone to depression, even more than normal, that can give up on beliefs, that can go in and out of feeling angst and feeling like nothing that you how do you say this? Like all is for naught, right? It's sort of like almost like a very manic depressive kind of place for Saturn. Mars moving into Scorpio, a place where he feels capable and is able to really express and be himself, might be lending a beneficial hand to Saturn. It might be allowing Saturn to say, if you're feeling depressed or feeling like it's all woe is you and you're just sort of slumped on the couch and wallowing, Mars will come along and say, enough. Let's get up off the couch, stop the wallowing, get out of our emotions. Let's stabilize the emotional, turmoil, and let's just do what we have to do. So that's also a positive thing that Mars could be helping Saturn out with by saying, enough of the angst or the emotional stuff. Let's stabilize that. Let's come back to a place where we're really effective. So, of course, Mars trine Saturn is going to be all about effective action. Anything that you really need to get done, anything that really needs, a lot of energy to come through and make something stick, make something last, that effort is very likely to be effective. And that's really what we get. So the week's not all bad. We have some pretty positive things coming in through here on the front of needing to anything that we need to get done. If we go forward now to the 14th, this is where we get the total solar eclipse coming through in the sign of Libra. And let me roll the hours forward so we get the exact time here. So this is happening right around, we have the moon making a conjunction right around 6 p.m. October the 14th. Now, actually, let me just take you over to time and date. All right, let's take a look at this eclipse. So we have, hopefully this is working right, but October the 14th, annular solar eclipse. So where is this visible? That is really what we want to look at. This is a great website, by the way, you guys. Timeanddate.com. You can look at all the eclipses. That's where I always go. But they generally have this handy dandy map that will show you where the eclipse is visible. And of course, the darker line in the middle is where you can see all of the eclipse. And then as it fans out on both sides of that, you can see partial or some part of it. So this is really happening over, it's coming down. It looks like through Oregon. It looks like it's going into Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and then it's coming down into the Yucatan, Central America, Panama, and then it's coming into Colombia, and then on into Brazil, and then it's sweeping by northern Brazil, going out to the coast, and then it's over. So that's where the most intense part of this aspect is going to be felt, or this eclipse is going to be felt, because if you have a birth chart in any of these areas that it's kind of close to here, eclipses over the birth chart are usually, or generally speaking, more intense than if they're not. I think most people will be feeling this. Now, the other thing to mention is that eclipses tend to have a kind of strange time effect where they're not like regular aspects, and it's like, okay, this is happening for a couple of days and it's happening right now. So there's an event likely to coincide with an eclipse on these days or whatever. Eclipses have more of a broad 6 month out. And for some strange reason, they really can be noticed even before they happen by months and months, or after they happen by months and months. So there's a strange time thing with eclipses, but The theme of this eclipse, as we went into a little bit for the overview of October's astrology, let me go ahead and pull up the real-time clock again, is that basically you could combine three pieces of symbolism here to sort of read this eclipse. One piece of symbolism is that we are, of course, talking about an eclipse that is happening in the sign of Libra, a Venus-ruled sign, so it may have something to do with desire or Venusian things. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that this is a solar eclipse, so this is having to do with the solar archetype. And then the third thing is that this is a south node eclipse, where the eclipse is happening on the south node rather than the north node. So you can bring in south node symbolism here as well. So you get Venusian symbolism combined with solar symbolism, or new moon symbolism combined with south node symbolism. And one way that you could read this is that there is, when we talk about solar eclipses, generally we're talking about very powerful new moons, and there's almost like a conception, or like something new that is beginning that has a solar nature to it. So is it something that has to do with some overarching life direction or purpose? Is there some new job? Is there some door that's opening in career? Is there some important person that you're meeting that is going to take your life in a different way that will become very central to your life? Are there new ambitions that are sort of stirring in your soul right now that are providing, kind of like a new purpose or direction in your life? Is there something that's motivating you that will have some central role of purpose that is beginning to be felt, or has been coming online over the last couple of months and is going to be building and becoming stronger as time goes on? That's the solar symbolism here of this powerful new moon that we call a total solar eclipse, right? Happening in the sign of Libra, a Venus-ruled sign. Could it be about Venusian things as well? It's likely to be about something creative, artistic, romantic, or relational. Maybe something along the lines of like justice or peace. But I would read this for most people as something about desire, what we want, like in a Venusian way. So is it a relationship or a person that we love? It's something that we love that is coming in and holding a central purpose. And it's also, we're bringing in the south node symbolism, which is very interesting because the south node symbolism tends to decrease things, right? It was said to, if planets are near the south node, for instance, in a birth chart, it's said to diminish the particular essence or nature of that planet in a particular way. So, for instance, Mars going by the south node would tend to diminish conflict, and as Mars passes, would tend to reverse that. So we saw Mars transiting over the south node right before we see conflict pick up again. But for a while there, we didn't have any conflict, right? It just, peace was sort of there, and then all of a sudden, as it passed over, it wasn't. But the south node tends to diminish things. So we're talking about potentially desires or what we love being diminished, and that is something that is becoming really centrally important, or holding some kind of central meaning or purpose or life direction. So for instance, it could be somebody that is really wanting to get away from a kind of indulgence. If somebody is had a struggle with drug abuse or alcohol or something like that, this could be a time where it's like this is finally the time to say, you know what, I'm done being that person. My new motivation for myself in life is going to be to move away from that desire of drugs and alcohol or something like that. Or it could be to move out of a relationship that doesn't fit or resonate with the kind of future you see for yourself. Maybe you're, with somebody that they don't want children and you do, or, they don't share the same values and principles, which is really important in a relationship. And so it's like, it's hard to see getting married or something along those lines. It could be a new art. Maybe there is the beginning of learning or developing a new artistic skill that wasn't there before, that will become very central to you as an artist, or something along those lines, right? Professionally, it could be, again, maybe there's an artistic or aesthetic or relational quality to the type of career or work that is beginning to come in right now, and that is happening over the course of 6 months. There's like a transition into something new. So those are a few ways in which you could read the South Node. Now, the danger here, let's get into some of the dangers. The South Node is also associated with a kind of anti-materialism or escapism out of the material realm on some levels. So it was associated with spiritual things, but it was also associated with spiritual bypassing or escapism. Being spiritual for the actual reason of just being able to not really be in the world, like using spirituality as a way to sort of just not really be responsible, or not doing the work in the mundane way that we all have to do, right? That is one danger. So this could also be a time where you go back to an indulgent thing, and there's like a new beginning. So this could be a time where, if there is a recovering alcoholic, like my father was a recovering alcoholic, this could be definitely a time where, I would worry about a relapse or something along those lines, or going back to foods that you had given up, or a diet you had given up, or potentially even a person that isn't so great, or somehow it didn't work out before, but now, you're going back to them, they're coming back to you. So that is the danger, is getting sucked into something again that didn't work out or isn't great for you, in a way that causes you to not be in the best alignment with, how do you say this? Like in a way that brings you into almost kind of a detached or escapist kind of place. And, we have recently encountered the sun making an opposition to Neptune, where maybe at that time there was an image that came through that gave us the ability to see something we haven't seen before, some kind of new horizon and very imaginal. And this could be part of a continuation of feeling like there's something more that we long for, or that we want, and it's like a dream, or like something we pine for, or something like that. But there can always be that danger of, it has to match up with what's real. Is it real? So there's a kind of that elusive quality here as well. So that is the week, everybody. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I hope you guys got something good out of this. Please let me know in the comments if you notice any of these things, any stories you guys want to share with some of the aspects coming through. And we'll be back again for another Mantic Monday episode next week on Monday. And we are going to get into some horoscopes pretty soon. We may do horoscopes for the eclipse that's happening at the end of the week here. That might be something that we do. So this week we sort of get the archetypal themes associated with the total solar eclipse. Next week, I may decide that would be a good rising sign horoscope. Let's take the eclipse through all 12 rising signs to see what topic specifically that might be about for you personally. Okay, that's what I have. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Have a great week and be safe out there, and I'll see you soon. Bye.